It's special guest time on the podcast, which is all about the world of marketing on television through TV shopping networks and infomercials. Are we on the air? I'm your host, Sean Wilsey, and for over 29 years, I've hosted shows on cable shopping networks generating billions of dollars in sales, and now I want to be your guide into this world, explaining how it works, why it works, what doesn't work, and introduce you to the people who are making it the success that it is today. It was a normal enough day in 1977 when a common household object changed the life of my next guest and gave birth to an entire industry. From that moment, Bob Circosta became the first ever host of a new industry called home shopping, which would move from radio to local TV in the Tampa area, later gaining national exposure in the 1980s as the Home Shopping Club. Since that time, not a month has gone by where Bob hasn't been a presence in our homes as one of the top-grossing television pitchmen of all time, having logged in over 25,000 hours on television, all of it live. TV's billion-dollar man is now an in-demand speaker and educator. To those wanting to get into the field, please join me in welcoming Budget Bob Circosta to the show today. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Sean. What a pleasure to be with you. I'm just so honored. And by the way, what you're doing here with this podcast, I think is just incredible.
Oh,
I mean,
you.
It's fun for me to be a part of it. But congratulations on having the idea.
Well, I appreciate it. It's just, it's fun for me. It's, I'm not an expert in a lot of things. I've failed the Jeopardy test 10 times. That's a true story. But I feel like I know a little bit about this. The whole Budget Bob thing. Who came up with the idea that you were going to be Budget Bob? Because everybody had a nickname, right?
Well, yeah. That's a great question. When we were just on radio locally, Bud Paxson, who owned the radio station and really my mentor. I mean, he was the one that I learned everything from. But Bud had this idea that, he wanted us to have little handles and it, created that comfort level, that friendliness. We had Bargain Barbara. We had Peddlin' Peg. And,
oh my God.
And I'll never forget one day I went in to do my radio show, and we were really doing two shows at the same time. We would do radio, and then I would run down the hall and do 3 hours of local cable TV. But anyhow, so I went in to do my radio show one day, and I walked by Bud's office, and I heard him yell out to me, "Bob," and I said, "What?" He said, "Come on in here." I said, "Okay." And I went into his office, and he said to me, "I have it." And I said, "You have what?" And he said, "I have your name." I said, "My name?" He said, "Yes." And then he paused and said, "From now on, you're going to be known as Marshall Bob, shooting down high prices." True story.
Bob. Oh my God.
Marshall Bob, shooting down high prices. So my first thought, Sean, was 4 years of college and I'm Marshall Bob. I mean, where did I go wrong here?
Right.
I went out and I did my radio show that day as Marshall Bob. I had no choice. And I went home, and I have to tell you, I was so depressed. I mean, I went home that night. And so after dinner, I'm reading the local newspaper. This is back in 1977, reading the newspaper. And I saw this ad, and the ad was for Budget Rent-A-Car. And for some reason, the Budget jumped out at me, and I said, "Wait a minute, Budget Bob. But wait a minute, Marshall Bob? Budget Bob. Well, Budget Bob's not terrific, but it beats the heck out of Marshall Bob."
Yes, it does.
And so, I went in the next day to do my local TV show, and I said, "Bud, this is not going to work. Marshall Bob is not going to work." And he didn't even look up. And he said, "Well, what do you want to be called?" I said, "How about Budget Bob?" He said, Yeah, fine, Budget Bob." And I went on to do my local TV show as Budget Bob. And the first caller on the air said, "You know what? You sound an awful lot like Marshall Bob." and the caller said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "Well, we shot him. He's gone. That's over." And so Budget Bob stuck. and I was budget Bob throughout local radio and local TV. And then when we went nationwide for one day, I was budget Bob. But then it changed after that. Oh yeah. Oh
Uh,
yeah. But that's the story. That's how it all. Well, Bubble and Bobby, who's still on the air
yep,
today,
still there.
she was called Bubble and Bobby because she had and continues to have this great personality, energetic personality. And but like I said, Peddle and Peg, Bargain Barbara, but that brings back lots of memories. But that's how it started.
Well,
Marshall Bob and went to Budget Bob.
and for those that don't know, again, you have the radio voice. How did you wind up in radio? Were you studying radio?
Oh yeah, I graduated from college with a degree in telecommunications, and radio was one thing that I did quite a bit. And I worked in local radio in different markets around the country, and did a little bit of local TV, and then was in Los Angeles and starved.
Right.
And my dad, who bought a place in Tampa, Florida, said, "Why don't you come to Tampa?" And so I said, "Well, I want to hang out a little bit more out here. I want to take a shot at it." And then I got tired of ordering hot water and putting in ketchup and stirring it up and pretending it was tomato soup. And I said, "Okay, I think I'm ready to come to Tampa." And so I loaded up the U-Haul and drove across the country. And as they say, the rest is history.
Well, tell everyone that doesn't know the story about the day the electric can opener came into your life. We got to get down to
that. Okay. All right. So here I am traveling back to Tampa, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And I went and, I had a few job interviews here and there. And I saw an ad in a local paper for a radio talk show host. And of course, that kind of, was something in my wheelhouse. And I said, "Yeah, let me try that." So I went down to the studio and I auditioned, and I got the job as a radio talk show host.
Now, was this talk
And
radio
so
like we think of it today, where
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
political kind of
yeah.
talk? Okay.
Oh yeah, every day from noon to 3, and we talked about politics. We talked about what was happening in the world. Had nothing to do with selling merchandise.
Right.
It was strictly news talk. That's what it was. And so, but see, what you have to understand is that this radio station, and the call letters are WWQT. It was 1470 on your AM dial.
Of course it was AM, of course.
Sean, we thought we were big time.
Yeah.
Big time. But it's important to understand that this was probably the world's worst radio station. I mean, it was awful. It really was pathetic. And of course, as you well know, in order to stay on the air, you have to sell advertising. Sure. And so Bud would go around town, and he would go into business after business and try to sell something nobody wanted. And that was to advertise on this radio station. But he sold a few contracts here and there. And one day, all true now, one day he sold a 13-week advertising contract to an appliance store. And as a matter of fact, the appliance store is still there.
No kidding.
And yeah,
wow.
Yeah, in Clearwater, Florida. And so for 13 weeks on my talk show, I talked about this appliance store, and I talked about the specials, and I urged people to go into the store and yada, yada. And so at the end of that 13-week cycle, Bud obviously went back to the appliance store to get paid. And the guy who owned the store saw Bud come in, walk through the door, and the guy said to Bud, what are you doing here? And Bud said, "Well, I came to get paid and renew." And the guy said, renew what? And he said, "The commercial." And the guy said, "You know what? Not one person has come in here and has even said they heard my commercial." Oh. And then he said, "Honestly, you do have one of the world's worst radio stations."
No, he didn't.
Oh yeah, that's what Bud told me. He said. So anyhow, so and Bud was a very persistent individual and a great communicator. And he said, "Well, that's not how this works. We had a deal." They went back and forth, back and forth. Finally, the guy who owned the appliance store said to Bud, "I tell you what I'll do. Instead of paying," all true now, Sean, Instead of paying you in cash, here's what I'll do. I look back by the door, see a couple of boxes. I had a big shipment come in a little while ago. Take one of those boxes of merchandise in lieu of payment. Well, by this time, this was like an hour and a half later. I think Bud felt better. He was leaving with something
Yeah.
tangible, you know. And so he picked up the box, got in the car, had no idea what he was going to do. He would later tell me, had no idea what he was going to do with it. And he drove back to the radio station. Now, meanwhile, every hour, I'm on the air during my talk show, but every hour they would do a local news and weather break, and I would take a little coffee break myself. And here I am sitting in this booth. Imagine this for a second. I'm sitting in this booth all by myself, having a cup of coffee, all by myself, not bothering anybody. Okay. And pretty soon the door opened up and in walked Bud. Now, Bud was about 6'8". So when he came in the room, you knew he was in that room. And he walked in this little booth and he's holding in his hands an electric can opener. Yeah. Now, again, Sean, this was 1977, so this was an avocado green.
Of course it was.
Of course. It was an ugly can opener. It really was. And 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 he looked at me and he said, Bob, when you come out of the news, I want you to sell this can opener. And I looked at him like he had three heads. I said, you want me to do what? He said, I want you to sell this can. I remember saying to him like it was yesterday. I remember saying, "Sell? Wait a minute. You know, I'm a newsman.
Right.
I have morals.
Yeah.
I have ethics. I don't want to sell something." And then he proceeded to explain to me the relationship between me getting a check and me selling the can opener.
Good point. Yep.
And life kicked in at that moment. And he said, I'll give you $1 a can opener. True story. And so I came on after the break. I said, folks, we'll get back to our topic in just a moment, but you'll never believe what happened during the break. And I recounted the whole story. And I said, if you call me up right now and reserve a can opener, come on down to the studio and pay for it. It's yours. And pretty soon the lights on the phone, they start to light up. In fact, I didn't know what those lights were because nobody had ever called me on the show before.
Called, sure.
No, that's right. And the guy on the other side of the window, my producer, he said people are calling in for the can opener. And on that day, Sean, August 28th, 1977, we sold 112 electric can openers. And God. That was the beginning of what we all now know as home shopping. It stayed on local radio for 5 years until 1982. And then 1982, they wired this particular county called Pinellas County. They wired it for this new thing called cable. And at that time, cable had nothing to do with programming or anything. It just had to do with getting a better reception. And so we went on Vision Cable, 1982, and we stayed on local cable until 1985. And I tell you what, it was going great guns. We only had about 83 people watching this, I think, at any time, but they were all buying. And in fact, in the early days, if somebody ordered something from me and they happened to live on my way home, I would take the product to their house. I mean, I would deliver it. Yeah. I'd knock on the door and I'd deliver the goods. You know, it was great. But I mean, so that's how it all began. It was never a story of people sitting around saying, "Hey, here's a great idea for a business."
Right.
That never happened. We were just trying to hit payroll. That's all we were trying to do.
You know, it's before, because I want to talk about when it goes national, but now you've brought up a topic I find very interesting myself, is because of the radio background. I think there's something to be said for the storytelling element of someone in radio and their ability to sell. Because on paper, you just think about this. You took an object, an electric can opener, and you sold
Mm-hmm.
it sight unseen, over 100
Yep.
of them to people.
Yep.
And we're in a day and age where, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but it's like it feels like we're losing a lot of the good storytellers on radio. You don't have that many anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
don't you feel that your ability, your radio background played a very important part of your success?
Oh, monumental
Yeah.
part. Incredible. I mean, what a training ground, like you just said. I mean, to be able to craft that story without seeing a product. I mean, I would put a gold chain on the air and I would go, I would bang the chain against the microphone
Yeah.
and I would say, hear that quality? Come on,
Yeah,
come on
hear
down.
that
And
quality,
and
seriously.
yes. I mean that, of course. And think about it this way, which I always found kind of fascinating. Even today, even today, it still is radio because the amount of time that you have a presentation on the air, the majority of the time is the viewers looking at the product.
That's a good
And
point.
what you're doing is talking about
That's a good
it and
point.
and creating the need for it. So even today, that I think it holds true. But you're so right. I mean, what a way to train.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a way to learn.
Um, so as you pointed out, it started local, was very successful,
Hmm.
and very different than what we know about today. But the day that they flipped the switch and it went up on the bird, as we used to say, the satellite, what was it like in
Oh
that
yeah.
building? What was the feeling? What was the emotion?
Well, yeah. So leading up to that, what we would do every New Year's Eve to our local TV cable audience, what we would do is go on what's called a cruise to nowhere.
Mm,
And so we would all board this cruise ship over at the port of Tampa, and we would go out and make a big circle in the bay. We wouldn't go anywhere, but we'd come back the next morning, New Year's Day, and we had a great time. So we're on this ship, and thank goodness I took a picture. We're on this cruise, and we're in a big dining room, one of those big ballrooms, big dining rooms, and myself, Bud, gentleman by the name of Roy Spear, who was Bud's partner,
sure.
and two other people were sitting at this big table. And both Bud and Roy said, you know what? This is working locally. And it was. We were generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales just on our local broadcast, just locally.
And people were
And so
picking
they
up the
said,
product. This wasn't sent to them. It was
oh,
still they had
yeah,
to go
no,
someplace and get it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of graduated from coming to the actual studio, picking it up there. And then we opened marts, little
Oh,
stores in the
okay.
area, and you had 7 days to come in, look at your product, and decide whether you wanted to keep it or not. You had 7 days to do that.
Wow.
So yeah, oh yeah, and one day a week I would always go to the mart because I would talk to these people. I would hear the viewers and enjoy them so much, but I never had the face to go along with the voice.
Sure.
So I would go in, I would meet them when they would come in. It was just fabulous. It was wonderful.
Wow.
So anyhow, so we're on this cruise ship, and they said, this is working locally, and if it works locally, it's got to work nationwide. We're going to go nationwide, and Bob, you're going to be the host. I said,
Oh.
okay, all righty. And that was, of course, December 31st. And the following July 1st, 1985,
Okay.
we rented time on the Galaxy satellite. And we
Wow.
went up on the air, and I said, welcome to the Home Shopping Club. That's what it was called then. Oh,
Sure.
by the way, on radio, you know what the name was on radio? What we were called?
I thought it was the same, but maybe not.
No. On radio, it was called the International Suncoast Bargainers Club. That's what it was called.
Flows
International.
off the
I mean,
tongue. Just flows. Just beautiful marketing there. Beautiful marketing.
on a windy day, the signal didn't even go around the block.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was incredible. But anyhow, so here we are, and I said, well, 1985, and I said, welcome to the Home Shopping Club. This is our first day on the air, and I tell you what we'll do for the next 3 minutes. If you call in right now in the next 3 minutes, I'm going to give you a 14 karat gold serpentine neck chain. And we're going to ship it to you absolutely for free. You just call in.
Wow.
Well, let me just tell you, the room was filled with operators. The hum was there, and no one called.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
No one called, which always, people always say what you just said. What? No one called? Keep in mind, this was 1985. People were not used to shopping this way at all.
Yeah.
They're looking at me. They have no idea who I am. And I'm saying, just call in. We're going to send this to you for free. What are they thinking? What's the catch? What's the catch? What's the gimmick here? And so no one called. The longest 3 minutes of my life, I could feel
Sure.
Bud pacing, in the background saying, oh, and this is after generating thousands and thousands of dollars every week locally. So we thought, obviously, nationwide, it's going to quadruple. Well, no, it didn't happen that way. And so after I said 3 minutes and everything, then we went to we put up a couple of products at a very deep discount. And a few calls trickled in here and there. I'll give you a piece of trivia. Okay.
Okay.
The first day on the air.
Yes.
5 hours nationwide. First day on the air for the TV home shopping industry. Total sales, $352. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. In fact,
Wow.
I refer to that. I refer to that as my Rule 352. And the reason I call it that is because within 90 days of that day, we did $1 million in one day.
Wow.
And people always ask me, well, how could that happen? How could that be? Because we were able to create a relationship. They didn't know what was going on the first day, second day, third day, but when they saw us every single day, and we were able to create that relationship, that created a trust, a comfort level, and we did $1 million in one day. So I call it Rule 352 because when I talk to entrepreneurs and people starting out in business, and if they get frustrated right away, maybe it's not working right away, maybe they're not getting the results that they want right away, just hang in there. Maybe pivot a little bit, change a little bit about what you're doing, but just stay in the game. Because if we would have said after that first day, wait a minute, this is not working. We're not, because we kept the local broadcast separate at the beginning because we didn't know what was going to happen. So if we would have said, forget this, we're not going to, home shopping would not have been developed the way it was. I'm sure somebody would have come along and done it, but it wouldn't have the history that it has right now. So that's how it all started. And, that was 1985. And then QVC came on the air the next year in 1986.
Right.
And later in the 80s, Sean, at one time, there were 28 other companies trying to do the same thing. Yeah, they were trying. But you got to keep in mind, I've always identified in order to be successful in any business, I don't care what your business is, in any business, you got to have two keys. I call them P and D. The D stands for distribution. In other words, you got to be in front of the right customers. And then P, you got to have the right presentation or the right message. If you're in front of the wrong people with the right message, you're never going to get results. If you're in front of the right people and you have the wrong message, you're not going to get any. So that we were able to lock that in. We locked in distribution. So all these other companies tried to do what we were doing, and they were very good at it, except nobody saw them.
Right.
And if people don't see you, then they're not there to buy it.
Well, Bob, I am loving this message that we have, this conversation that we have going on here. But we are going to have to put a pin in it, stop for a moment. We'll pick it right up here next time. I hope in the meantime, everybody will go check out bobcircosta.com. And if you want to follow Bob on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, same handle on all of them. Bob Circosta, Bobcircosta. He's doing it the right way. I'm S. Wilsey on one, Sean Wilsey on another. I need to simplify it. But I also hope you'll check me out at my day job as a host for the Shop LC Television Shopping Network. And please let your friends know about the podcast because we are continuing with Bob Circosta on the next show. Follow me on Twitter at Sean Wilsey, full name, and on Instagram at swilsey. Thank you for downloading this edition of Are We on the Air? Love your 5-star reviews wherever you can leave them. We'll see you next time. This has been a King Bobby production.
Yes, I know, Travis. That's why we give such bargains.